you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I'm just having fun with my guest on the studio and my co-host as well. We really appreciate you. Right, my co-host, my king. How
How are
was your
you?
week been?
Oh, it's been good. It's been very good. Relaxing, worked hard, met a lot of people, a few meetings. So yeah, it's good. And I had, we had a lot of good, great feedback from last week's guests. He was absolutely amazing, wasn't he? It was just like, his story, the whole emotional resilience, how he went, how he managed to like overcome all of this. And yeah, it was
It was
fantastic.
it was fantastic. But we got the most awesome, amazing guest as well with us, who's going to share their journey with us as well. Would you introduce our guest,
Yes,
please?
I'm gonna. His name is Dr. JL, and he's boasting over 13 years of teaching experience and armed with a PhD in English and an MA in African American Studies from the University of Missouri, Columbia. They bring a wealth of knowledge and unique perspectives to their classrooms. Their innovative teaching approach entwines hip hop, film, literary criticism to engage students, sparking not just interest, but encouraging the development of critical thinking and writing skills. As the founder and coach of DadCypher, a hip hop guide to fatherhood, he offers workshops, consultations, content creations, and helps dads to remix their stories of fatherhood. Their journey as a fatherless dad who found solace in, I'm just reading this. Who found solace and identity through hip hop have been shared and celebrated through published op-eds and articles on platforms like Blavity. Is that correct?
That's
So,
correct.
Dr. JL, welcome to the Father's Talk Show. Absolute pleasure to have you up here. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started on this journey. It sounds really fascinating.
Oh, this is awesome. First and foremost, I want to say hello to the UK. How you all doing out there? Again, my name is Dr. J.L. Adolph. I am a born and raised St. Louis native, and I am living in Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Killer Mike, home of Outkast, and so many civil rights leaders, Martin Luther King Jr., and everything. So it's a pleasure to be here and a part of this show. But I would just say really quickly a bit about my journey. I grew up, for the most part, I am a product of teen parents. And for the most part, I grew up in an environment where I grew up fatherless. And that sort of thing. And very, very meager, I want to say meager beginnings, but it was also very rich in love as well. My mother was 15 when she had me. And so for the most part, I was raised primarily by my grandmother while my mom, financially took care of me. However, growing up in the inner city, it was a lot of significant challenges that I faced for the most part. And those challenges were imagine one going on this journey called manhood without a GPS map. And that's where I was headed. I did not have a lot of direction, a lot of guidance. So what I would say people like myself I'm an 80s to 90s baby. And so a lot of us that grew up in these sort of inner city hubs throughout the states, a lot of us were able to find father figures or surrogate fatherhood through hip hop culture because it was a group of mostly males, and they would talk about everything about what it meant to be a male, a Black male in American society. And for many of us who whose fathers during that 80s and 90s time were either incarcerated or were either dealing with deindustrialization within our communities. It was a space, hip hop offered us a space where we could kind of be socialized in who we are as and who we were to become as men and that sort of thing. So it was some good and there was certainly some negative aspects of it. However, I would say for the most part, I can proudly say that hip hop was a lifesaver for me and many of Generation X during our time period. And so fast forward, as I began to embark on my journey as a young man at the age of 23, I still faced a lot of struggles. And for the most part, growing up as a fatherless father, a big part of my journey was really trying to figure out how to basically fly the plane while building it. And that's what I had to deal with in terms of raising my young ones. I ended up being a father of four. My oldest is 25, my daughter's 21, and now the twin boys are 18. So three boys, one girl, and it was a lot of struggle for the most part because I relied a lot on hip hop culture. I also relied a lot on shows like The Cosby Show, shows like The Fresh Prince, and that sort of thing. And so, needless to say, I struggled a bit because many of these shows are only a half an hour sitcom, but it doesn't teach you how do you deal with what happens when those lights turn off after a half an hour. That's when the real fatherhood began. So, a big part of my journey was then just trying to take bits and pieces of whatever fragments of fatherhood that I could do and try to shape it. But lastly, I would say the final piece that really helped things to come together for me was actually having the courage to begin therapy. And that was a huge, huge contribution to what I do today, because what I do today is I use what I call hip hop therapeutic writing. And it's a combination of journaling, it's a combination of rewriting popular lyrics and that sort of thing. And I try to make it so that other males can feel vulnerable enough, especially in Black and Brown communities, to share their story, to heal, using hip hop as a sort of gateway to strong mental health in order to remix the dad narrative. So that's just a little bit about myself, but I'm hoping as we get into this conversation that I can unpack everything slowly so the viewers can get a deep dive into what it means to really remix a dad narrative.
Thank you so much for that. That was really deep, and you took it really deep. And there's a lot of men out there who probably would identify what you just said. But you say something really interesting. You were watching the Cosby Show. Were you watching it to
Yeah.
look at what the father role was, or like the
Yes.
way, I used to the Prince of Bel Air. I used to watch that. Why were you watching it for? Is it to kind of try to see how a father should be?
Yeah, well, during my formative years of just trying to figure out by having the absence of a father figure, um,
Mm,
I was just basically pining for any form of fatherhood that I can grab a hold of. And so the Cosby Show, I would say, was one of the first shows that I remember where I saw like an active father within the household. And he was different from anyone that I had seen in my neighborhood. I mean, this guy was a doctor, his wife was a lawyer, and and he's always there. He's effervescent, he's funny, and that sort of thing. So it kind of formed a bit of an imagination of what I would think a father should be. And
Mm-hmm.
then with the Fresh Prince, of course, with um, growing up with Will Smith, he kind of Will Smith, I would probably say, is the quintessential model of Generation X during that time period of the 90s. And just to see his interaction with Uncle Phil, and it was really kind of that sort of generational warfare that you saw between a baby boomer and
Mm-hmm.
Generation X, and the misunderstandings and really trying to find common ground. I would say
Mm-hmm.
for the most part that gave me somewhat of a bit of what it was like. However, I would say it was the best of times and the worst of times in many respects, because while those images were positive, a lot of times it did not match up with my living environment. Because when you
Mm-hmm.
think about Fresh Prince and when you think about the Cosby Show, it was not in an inner city environment. And so for the most part, it really, for someone like myself, it gave me a vision, but I couldn't fully see myself in these characters in terms of the lifestyle and opulence that they were living. So, you
Yeah,
know, so that was the struggle.
yeah. I was going to say it probably gave you a vision, a very good vision of what perhaps a perfect uh, household could be like. And I remember watching the Cosby Show myself, and yeah, I remember one instance when I think was he called Theo? Is it Theo?
Theo, yes,
Theo,
Malcolm
yes.
Jamal Warner,
And then
Theo.
his dad his dad was saying, look, he wanted to go live by himself, and then he was going through the expenses, and it was absolutely hilarious. It's like, so the government takes this, and then your girlfriend will want that, and then by the end he's left with nothing, and he doesn't want to move out of a house.
Yeah, he was like, because Theo really was fighting to become a regular person, and he was like, yeah, the government comes out after regular people first. So
Was it? Yeah.
It was a really good show. But however, what I want to know, what were the challenges you face as a father? What was the age that you start having your children? And what was the challenges that you face? I mean, it would have been lovely to be the Cosby kind of father story. Obviously, your case is a lot different. So what was the challenges that you faced as a father, and what age did you start having your children?
Well, I was 23 when I became a father. And I would say immediately I faced a lot of challenges. One, because I did not grow up in a Brooklyn brownstone like on the Cosby, or I didn't grow up in Bel Air. So for the most part, I would say the biggest challenge that I faced was really I hadn't embarked on a journey of self-healing yet. I
Mm-hmm.
growing up in poverty in an inner city environment in the 80s and 90s, it was very traumatizing for the most part. For the most part, we're talking about crack generation. We're talking about a time where society were deeming young black and brown males as super predators. That was one of the things that the Clinton administration was saying, oh, these they are super predators and that sort of thing. And we always had this narrative that was written that we would not reach the age of 21. So a lot of that was very traumatic when you have a script that was written about your life and what society expects from you. So immediately my challenges as a dad really was very complex, because you have the historical trauma of people of color in the States, as well as I had my own family trauma in terms of I was maybe the second or third generation of fatherlessness because my mother's father was in her life for the most part, not until she became 7, and then on my father's side, his dad wasn't there. So it's this vacuum of fatherlessness that was there, and a lot of insecurities that took place. I did not have a lot of self-love. I did not have a lot of self-esteem. What I had was, for the most part, um, a huge wealth of hypermasculinity, and
Mhm.
for the most part, and so it was a challenge. I would say earlier on, my challenge was really trying to learn to love myself, to try to hyper correct a lot of the things that were taking place. And I would probably say my biggest challenge as a parent was really trying to realize that my children and their experience have to
Mhm.
be totally divorced from my shortcomings as a young man. Because just to explain it a different way,
Mhm.
in many ways, when I had my family, I kind of viewed it as a medium in which I can hyper correct the things that I thought went wrong in my childhood. And really, in many ways, that was unfair to even my kids, because they're growing up in a different time, in a different generation. So I would say the biggest challenge was I was not complete within myself, because I hadn't embarked on a mental health journey. I didn't even know that that was a space for people of color, because at that time, especially in America, mental health was deemed something that people of color did not do. It was like, we go to church, we don't share our business, and that sort of thing. And so I would say the biggest challenge was really trying to figure out how to begin my healing journey without hurting my kids in the process.
Wow. What
But the,
brought you to that? Sorry, just
no,
one
no, go on,
question.
go on.
What brought you to the point that you said, right, I need help, I need support to take that journey of having you to be counseling? So what brought you to that point? And you say, right, I need to change my life at this point so I can be a better father to my children.
You know what? I think one of the things that really brought me to that point, I would say earlier on, again, I have to credit hip hop culture, because in many spaces, hip hop culture, for the most part, it's the only genre of music that really talks deeply about psychological pain. It
Mhm.
talked deeply about family dysfunction. It allowed a space where males, for the most part, and women too, can write and journal their story in poetic form. So I would say I was always a writer, and I was writing poetry and that sort of thing. So I would say being able to express my feelings and having this sort of space of catharsis through hip hop was always there. However, once you're able to express your feelings and have a space of catharsis, you still have to know, okay, how do you channel that into healing? And I will never forget, I was watching this HBO show. It's this HBO series called In Treatment, and it was Gabriel Bourne, I believe. And what it was, they had an actor by the name of Blair Underwood, and he was this character that was just like me, Generation X. He was very hyper masculine, grew up in the inner city, and here he has this psychoanalyst therapist that's talking to him, and and through their conversation,
Mhm.
I noticed a change in the character. And then I noticed when I was watching through through television, I was like, I found it was connecting to parts of me. This is why representation is so important, because I saw a character that looked like me, that had the same background, same environment. And here he had this sort of safe space where he was able to piece together and really get connected to those parts of himself that he had locked away. And at that point, um, it inspired me to want to look at those broken spaces in myself. And I would probably say it came at a time when I was actually going through the process of going through divorce. And so I was looking for, a space for healing and that sort of thing. And it's just funny how it all came together. It was like, here I can have these hip hop lyrics and these songs like Miss Jackson and Nas Daughters and Letter to My Son. And then I'm watching Blair Underwood, and then it just sort of connected, and it just really inspired me to go and get help. And at the University of Missouri is where I actually started at the age of 31. I actually started my mental health journey. It began there. And I remember my first session, I told my therapist, I said, Dr. Myers, I know how this process works. I watched it on TV, so I'm an expert now. I said I should be able to do this in 7 sessions and get healed. And so it didn't quite work that way, but it really was the beginning of me beginning this powerful journey of healing from a lot of trauma that took place in my life.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's amazing. And that is, at 31 to begin that journey, I think it's some men and some people, women don't begin that journey at that age as well. So it must have had that degree of self-awareness within yourself that was probably consequently brought by the hip hop lyrics. You start to know, oh, I feel this way, I feel you could relate.
Mhm.
So how then did you move on from that, and what changes did you start to notice between your old self and the new self after the healing?
Well, I would probably say, and this is for anyone out there, when you're going through the therapeutic process, you're not making sweeping changes. Really, change occurs in those needle marks. So I did not see immediate change right away, because really, for the most part, the therapist is really just a conduit or a vessel for the most part, but you have to do the work. And so, really, a big part of it was being honest with oneself, being vulnerable enough to share, being open to the fact that some of the experiences that you had in your childhood were not the best experiences, and maybe you should not pass that on. And so, I would say, for the most part, yeah, I just noticed needle mark changes. I grew up in an environment where kids were supposed to be seen but not heard. And so I grew up with quite a bit of corporal punishment. Um, it was a lot of times a lot of verbal abuse, I would say. And don't get me wrong, I know my loved ones love me, and I would say that, but I would say they were dealing with the tools that they had accessible to them. And so I had to really learn how I was repeating some of those mistakes, because I had carried that legacy of brutality and some of those behaviors into being a father. And I really had to come to grips with you know, these abusive tendencies that I had within myself, and began to see that it wasn't healthy for me. So I don't want to repeat that. And it was really tough because I would probably say the child that suffered the most probably was my oldest son, because I hadn't begun my journey yet. And so here he is. He had this father that was loving and joking like the father, like Cosby Show and that sort of thing. But yet at the same time, when it came to punishment and discipline, it was like this sort of brutality that took place and that sort of thing. So, you know, it really took me having to come to grips with that, forgiving myself and asking my child for forgiveness, and trying to change that part of the narrative. So I would say it was needle mark movements that took place in you know, and I would probably say it's still a journey that I'm on. I mean, because I'm just a work in progress. And I would say, but I am so happy that I began this journey of self-reflection, self-awareness, self-management, you know, and learning empathy, I think, for the most part, because when one grows up in the inner city, there is an absence of empathy, and it's that absence of empathy is a space of protection. I cannot afford to look at things from your point of view and perspective, because so much of my life in the inner city was about self-preservation. How do I survive? How do I overcome gain territories? How do I deal with the intellectual violence that take place in American schools? How do I endure the violence that I hear from media depictions of what Black and brown life is? So I had to learn, though, that as one succeeds, that you have to transition from a life of survival to a life of thriving. So you have to transition from how to survive to how to thrive. And that was really one of the major things that I noticed in myself, is now I'm no longer trying to survive. I am really trying to thrive and build upon the healing that I have.
Beautiful.
I just want to, you said something that was really kind of touched my heart. And that is you as a father to go and apologize or ask your son for forgiveness. I mean, many parents won't do that. As far as they're concerned, you know, particularly from our culture,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to happen. So how did your son receive it, and how's your relationship with him now?
I would say, you know, I apologize actually to all of my children. I actually did like this poem where it was called, the name of this poem was called Confessions of an Abusive Father.
Oh,
And
wow.
it really detailed every mistake that I thought that I made with my children. And for the most part, I didn't want them to feel sorry for me, because it was important that that I forgive myself, but it was more important for me that they understand that the trauma that I inflicted onto them was
Mhm.
not their fault. So I really wanted to emphasize that everything that was wrong that I did was that I take ownership of that. I didn't have the tools. However, that is still not an excuse for what it is that I inflicted. And so, and I was letting them know that it was important that, you know, I get that they understand that as dads, we make mistakes. And that the thing is, we have to take ownership of those mistakes. And so that's what I ended up doing. You know, I did it in poetic form, in true hip hop fashion, just writing out lyrics, all of these things. And I would say, amazingly, my kids, our relationship has changed so much, because they were going through their challenges in their teenage years as well. And I think it really, by me being vulnerable enough, it allowed me enough empathy for me to sit and really have enough grace to allow them to go through their struggles through the teenage years. And the main thing that I would do then is we just had a space to talk. It was a lot of talking. It was a lot of getting them therapy. It was a lot of writing, and that sort of thing. And I would say our relationship is different tremendously. I would say for the most part, I'm proud of the progress and evolution that I made as a dad. One of the things that I that I tell them, that every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. So, our job in life is to evolve. And if you're not evolving for the better, then, basically you're spiritually and psychologically dead. And so, I think for the most part, we have a stronger relationship, and I'm able to accept them for who they are.
I've always found that, when you shift your own emotional states, then the emotional state of your children shift as well. And as you clear your baggage as well, they can clear theirs much more easily. So whether that's a direct connection of emotion, or whether it's you acting as an inspiration, then it happens, it changes. It's like, you're acting as an inspiration, you're directly impacting their emotional energy. And it's extremely, I think, important and powerful that you undertook this journey. And what I'm learning from doing this talk show is that there is so many different ways of undertaking this healing journey, because I would never have thought of using hip hop,
Oh, yeah.
and yet it's or should I say, of using hip hop and creating your own lyrics, creating your own expression of your emotional state. So that's absolutely amazing to hear.
I
Yeah.
think that is absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. Now, you work with single fathers, you work with fathers. Tell us about their journey. Tell us about your story. Tell us about what are the challenges that these fathers that you work with, and sharing your story right now, because I'm telling you, that is so powerful, because we need men like you that goes into to work with some of these fathers and some of this family to be able to change the dynamic of their relationships. So please tell us about your work with this fathers you're doing, please.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I would say I am an English professor. So for those who know, although I'm Dr. JL, I am not a therapist. I am married to one.
So
But
shall we say you for all your classes, for all your therapies for free then?
Yeah, you know what? Funny side story, real quick. When we first met, she was a graduate student and I was a graduate student, and she asked for volunteers to do a psych eval. So she actually did a psych eval of me before we even got together. So any crazy, she knew ahead of time. So it's all her fault. So she knew what she was getting into. So so I would say that well, first and foremost, I am an English professor at Georgia State University Perimeter College in Decatur. And for the most part, my background was teaching a lot of composition courses, a lot of writing courses, and that sort of thing. And what I noticed is a lot of young men and a lot of young women, they would have sometimes these emotional outbursts And sometimes you would tell that it was something beyond just the classroom dynamics that was having an impact. And I recognized it because I too was them. Many of my students come from meager backgrounds and beginnings. So I was noticing these sort of emotional areas where it was some room for growth. So eventually, I got to the point where I was like, okay, let me bring in some of the tools that I was using for myself. And I said, well, how can I incorporate what it is that I do in terms of education with who I am as a person? And so one of the things that I began doing, I started doing some research, and I was a part of this program called College to Career. And our job was to prepare these students to write for career readiness. And so what I began to realize is that these students have the skill set, but it was the soft skills, like the emotional intelligence. So many of my writings were beginning to reflect on how did your father experience shape your career path? How does family trauma it shape career choices? And we began to really write on these topics. And I would have young men and young women that these topics touched them so much because these were spaces that were unhealed, but yet they didn't realize it was impacting them in school related environments and in their workplace. They were wondering sometimes why they were unable to deal with conflict in a way that was professional. They were beginning to understand why they had issues with self-awareness and self-management, why they lacked motivation and poor social communication skills. So I began to use this sort of therapeutic writing. And so we would look at examples from hip hop, we would look at inspirational quotes. And I was like, okay, how do we translate that into work related environments so that these young people can learn how to channel anger, how to channel emotions, how to speak in a way that, and how to really have empathy and that sort of thing, and it opened and prepare them for the career market. So I would say it was out of those experiences that I began to reach young fathers and that sort of thing. And it was funny because I would say this uh, doing the college to career path is really talking about creating a plan and creating a vision. And without vision, the people will perish, right? So with these dads, I really was able to connect with them because I was like, okay, one of the big things that shape at least American when it comes to American masculinity and manhood is being able to provide. And so what I was doing was, for the most part, I was like, hey, if you want to get the bag, which is what young people call the money and that sort of thing, if you want to get the bag and that sort of thing, we're going to have to increase your emotional intelligence. So everyone wants to make more money and that sort of thing. And that was my hook. Once I got them in with that hook, I began to say, okay, well, we need to unpack and explore because these are things that could prevent you from getting where you want to be financially. And so it was a big part of unloading what happened to them with their fathered experience and that sort of thing. So what I found with dads, hip hop is a tool that's able to help them be vulnerable enough to share their stories. Once you're vulnerable enough to really share your story, that becomes your brand. And I was really start telling them that what is your brand as a dad? What is your brand as a romantic partner? What is your brand, in this workplace? And then I started talking to them about legacy and all those different sort of paths. So hip hop, in a way, allowed me to help to break that sort of masculine wall and then really get into those soft spots and being able to build upon that and to show that these areas, this thing that we're trying to insulate ourselves from, is actually blocking out love and other things that we're going to need to thrive in this world. So a lot of these experiences have been rewarding, and it's been helpful. I've had dads, I've had young women that have explored their fatherless journey or family trauma, and they have come to me. Actually, I had a student this week who gave me like a bear hug today. She was like, "Why do you have these writing prompts before class that make me think about all these emotional things?" And then she said, "But I guess I need to deal with this in order to heal." And then she gave me a hug. And anyone who knows me know that I'm not really super affectionate. But I was like, "Oh my God, okay, what do I do here?" But I let down the guard and allowed the hug.
JL, I think your generation of students are gonna grow up to be the next big songwriters for hip hop. You
You know what? I hope so, because hip hop was always a place. I would probably say this: one of the songs that stick out to me the most, when Tupac did the song "Dear Mama."
Mm.
And in the song "Dear Mama," he talked about his mother drug addiction, but he also talked about what the hole that was left in his heart with his father not being there. And I would say, although Tupac wasn't the first to really talk about fatherhood, I think he really popularized um, Black males looking at vulnerability as a strength. And that's all I want to do for my students, to let them know that vulnerability can be a strength, and you should use that to create your story, your brand, to be what it is or who it is that you want to be. It's I think, if nothing else, I want my students to realize that if you do not write your own narrative, then someone else will write it for you. And so, and I think that's really, that's the most important thing to me as a dad and as a person that does this kind of work.
Mm.
How does a father, I mean, you're doing incredible work out there. I love how you're using music to reach out to the fathers. And I really love the part, the money, the bag. I think I'm going to use that next time I'm recruiting men for one of the training programs.
Oh yeah, that if you want to get the bag, that's what they're all about.
Yeah, they just come in, So how, because I think what also you were talking about is having that purpose filled as a father as well. Can you give us kind of some tips and some steps if somebody's listening now today, how they can step into that purpose of who they are to find themselves? Can you just share
Sure,
something like that?
sure. I would say it's a journey. First and foremost, I think you need to seek guidance and counsel. First and foremost, I would say if you are seeking purpose, it's important that you get to a space where you can isolate yourself and start thinking about, who am I? I think that's the most important question. And when I say isolate yourself, what I mean is, for the most part, you have to go to this sort of space where you're void of all distractions. That means off your phone, off of social media, really getting into a space where you can really look in the mirror at yourself. I think that's a real challenge for a lot of people to really just say, who am I? So it all begins with who you are. Then after that, then I start then if one begins like the process of journaling, really writing down the parts of how you see yourself. Um, I would say, and this is a tip I got from Lisa Nichols, who an amazing motivational speaker. She was like, begin writing the lies that you have been told in life, and then underneath write your truth. And what you will find is oftentimes out of that trauma and pain, you will begin to find that your purpose was somewhere in there. My purpose came out of, who would have thought a kid that grew up fatherless to teen parents would end up being an advocate for fatherhood. But it was out of that pain that I began to find purpose. So I would say isolate yourself, begin to write. And then I would say find mentors. And for me, I found mentors in my first black male professor, or actually male teacher by the name of Dr. Brian Carter. He inspired me. He became my spiritual father. I would say is another professor, Dr. Palad, was a spiritual father. And I even found a spiritual mother in Dr. Gillis. So you want to find these people who are doing what it is that you think you might want to do, and you just want to orbit around those particular areas. And then I would say after that, try to find a group of like-minded people. In Atlanta, when I first got here, I became a part of this amazing group called Fathers Matter ATL. And it was a group of practitioners, educators, policymakers, and all of us, while we're not doing the same thing, we're all seeking common ground. So again, I would say, so to break that down to bite-sized chunks, isolate yourself, begin writing your vision, begin seeking mentors, and then form a team. And I think that will help to lead to a purpose-filled life.
Yeah, because I think it's practically impossible to find your true purpose if you don't really know who you are. If you think you're somebody else because people have told you this and have, thrown a narrative to you which isn't really you, then you're going to be lost. So you have to really release and remove all of those layers of trauma to be able to see who am I really. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I totally agree because I mean, and it's funny because we as humans, for the most part, we are just natural storytellers to begin with. We understand and see our world through stories. I mean, and even the greatest prophets, for the most part, were storytellers. Christ with parables. Anyone that's really great, as you guys know, Winston Churchill, storytellers, all of those type of things. So one has to begin to realize that they too can become the author of their own story. And with Fathers Matter ATL, you know, surprise, surprise, I'm on the branch of the team that's about reclaiming the narrative. Like, how do we snatch back our story? How do we start taking control of our story? So, storytelling is so important. It shapes who we are. And by isolating yourself, you could begin to start listening and reflecting on what your story is. But then it's important to write it down, find those mentors to keep guiding you, and then form your team. It's just so important, to do that.
Do you think, just on a slightly separate point, do you think that the stories that we're being told, either black, white, Asian, by certain outlets,
Mhm.
do they align with who we are, or are they really? Is there some? For me, it seems like a lot of these stories are propaganda. They're designed to separate, create division, and it's not serving humanity.
I totally agree with that. And I think it's by design. I mean, I think for the most part, it's about we all tell stories, and it's stories that's used to try to motivate, and you could use story. It's kind of like the power of life resides in the tongue. It's like you could bring life or death with the stories that you tell. Now, if you choose life, then you will probably gravitate towards stories of redemption, stories of growth, stories where life is not so black and white, but you live in a gray area and that sort of thing. And those are really powerful stories. But I think what the people who try to divide us try to construct stories that are absolutism, like black people are this, white people are this, Asian people are this, Latin X is this. And I think for the most part, we are inundated with, and with social media, we're inundated with and bombarded with so many of these stories that we haven't cut the noise to really get in tune with who we are. So I think, that's for the most part, which is once you start finding out who you are, then I believe in that law of attraction. You start attracting people who are like you. And this is how you form a cipher. Like, hence the name DadCypher. It's a group of like-minded dads. And in ciphers in hip hop, it's spaces where people talk and listen, call and respond, like the preacher to the congregation, and that sort of thing. And I believe that is the space that you want to be. Everyone should just find their cipher, their particular space. In that way, you can grow, and iron begins to sharpen iron in that regard.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. And I really love the part where you said, know who you are. And
Mm.
many of us, we don't whatsoever. And also the journaling, because for me, that's how my book came about. And I truly connect with you, particularly for some of us that come the background of our family and everything. I never realized, as much as I was doing the teaching, the training, the coaching, the mentoring, but yet deep inside me, I was carrying all these triggers, just waiting for like a bomb to be explode. But what I found, and which was so true, what you said, is journaling, writing. And I find just taking that space and wrote, not only I got my healing because I begin to understand, like you said, as you wrote what you've been told, but at the bottom of it, when you wrote the truth, and that's what happened to me. Okay, that's what I was being told, but actually, this is me. So, to all our viewers, please take this, do a journaling. It's really lovely. We're now coming towards to the end of our talk show. Dr. JL, you've done awesome, amazing,
Thank
and we
you.
will definitely would love to have you back again because there were so many questions, as you could see, and I think I didn't even have to ask the question. You were just really covering them, and I'm like, okay, it's ticked that, okay, it's done that. Absolutely phenomenal and fantastic. If somebody wants to work with you, or we've got a viewer, whether from the UK. I mean, this is what I love about now because you can talk to anybody in any part of the world, you'll be able to connect. If anybody wants to work with you, how could they go about doing so?
Okay, so you could find DadCypher, DadCypher. DadCypher is on all social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on TikTok even and Instagram, although I don't check Instagram quite as often. I'm sorry, young people, but I am on TikTok quite a bit. You could also look me up, Dr. JL Adolf on LinkedIn. That's where I do a lot of contact. Or if for those who are looking to partner up in the UK with a tremendous fatherhood team and group, I actually have my own Wu-Tang clan, which is Fathers Matter ATL. And you could go to fathersmatteratl .com and you can find and connect there. And you will find not only myself, but my whole team of people that we work together on changing fatherhood narratives, and we're very active. So if you want to find out, I would say Fathers Matter ATL, DadCypher. Look us up on all social medias, and also I'm on YouTube as well, DadCypher. So check me out. And click and subscribe for this show as well too. Click and subscribe for the Father Talk Show. These guys are great.
That's the first time anyone's done the plug for our show. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you so much, Daniel. Michael,
we gotta remind the
listen,
viewers.
I have so much enjoyed listening to you, JL. It's just been really just a pleasure, fresh breath of fresh air as well. And I think I really salute you for the work that you're doing for these young men. And you know, it's so needed. And you know, the more people that do this, and you're creating the next generation of people that are going to go out there and help change the world for the better. So thank you so much for doing that.
Hey, I appreciate it so much. Love you, UK. I'm
we
going
love you too, you guys
you know
out there.
You know what? It's so funny. The only thing I know is like Chef Ramsay, and so I'm gonna have to take a trip to the UK and go to one of his restaurants to just look around.
Yeah.
So, if you ever come and visit, do let us know. Definitely. To all Daniel, how can they possibly reach you?
Again, mine's clearthepath.co.uk, and I'm on LinkedIn as well through Clear the Path and my name. But yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all our Facebook viewers. And if you want to reach out to the Father Talk Show, you know, where the power of fatherhood is, please just connect us with Facebook. Again, we are in LinkedIn and also TikTok. I post regularly every Saturday. And so please do follow us. And there is a lot of help out there for every single father out there, and also men. Okay, but we want to say thank you to our guest, Dr. JL, who's done amazing and I mean phenomenal, fantastic. So please do follow him as well if you need any advice, because every help counts. So we want to say thank you so much as we come to the end of the Father Talk Show, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, Saturday, same place, same time, at 1 p.m. UK time. To all our viewers all over the world, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thank you. Goodbye. Doctor? Thank you so much.
Hey, not a